follow Steve Jobs. Let's just be honest. Yeah. So that's number one. Number two, with Steve gone, I think when you look back, any generation always looks back and says, when I was a kid, we didn't do stuff like that, right? So I say to my kids, when I was a kid, I never did stuff like this. I was respectful. I was home. We ate dinner at the table. We played, board games at night. None of this stuff where you're constantly on your phone and all that. And they're going to tell their kids, when I was a kid, we were on our phones, but at least we were at the dinner table. So every generation looks back and says, when I was, the good old days is always better. So now, of course, there's a tendency to think the good old days was better. But, Steve made some mistakes too, right? I'll point out, when the iPhone was first introduced, there was a decree that there would be no third-party apps. And Apple said, we're not going to allow third-party apps because a phone needs to be secure and reliable. And if we open up for third-party apps, your phone will be not secure and not reliable. Now, one could ask the logical question at that press conference, well, if your phone is so valuable and needs to be secure and reliable, what about our computers, which have thousands of third-party apps? But nobody's going to ask that. In reality, distortion field. Okay, so fast forward a year later, and now Apple announces we're going to bless third-party apps. We're going to have a store. We're going to have this, SDKs. We're going to have everything to make it possible for third-party apps. They did a 180-degree reversal in 1 year. So Steve can make mistakes. He did make mistakes. I have to believe that even up to the iPhone 5, many of the decisions were made with Steve. Like, I bet you Steve was in on the, let's change the connector thing. Certainly he was there on the let's change the connector for the Macintosh laptops, right? So some of it may be bad decisions that were made under his watch that are just coming to market now that we're blaming on Tim Cook, which is probably unfair. Now, having said that, to me, before Apple was a really efficient thing. Now, if you have a really smart and visionary dictator, a dictatorship is very efficient. It's just the odds of having a smart, visionary dictator are low, right? But if you have one, that's the perfect situation. So before, all decisions came to Steve, right? Dad made the decision. And Dad was so freaking smart, he was right most of the time. That is a really efficient system. Now, Dad is gone. So now all the kids have to fight, right? So either there's going to be fighting, or, God help us, Apple will become a marketing-driven company. And I'm using air quotes because I think that will be the death of Apple. So when you start hearing that Apple is doing focus groups to decide whether they should change connectors, and they're going to have these tests, I think that's the beginning of the end of Apple. Because Apple is in the business of creating things for people before they realize they need it.
Well, wasn't that from Steve Jobs' taste?
Absolutely.